The title, Kennedy's Brain, and the explanation that Kennedy's brain has gone missing since...
Which it has, obviously. I mean, it's based upon the truth. Naturally, the title, Kennedy's Brain, is a metaphor. And a metaphor, and this is a fairly good title, because people will start, what is this now? But the story goes, and I've read thousands of pages about this, that when President Kennedy was killed in the beginning of the 60s, a part of his brain disappeared after the autopsy. And it never was found again. And obviously I started to think when I heard about that if the brain of a dead North American president can disappear, so can anything in the world disappear. And obviously you can very easily think of a conspiration.
Let's do the basic coverage of what the plot is. Let's start with Louise, I guess.
Well, the story is very, as all stories should be, is very easy to explain. We have a Swedish female archaeologist working in Greece. She is divorced and she has a son. And in a certain situation she is going back to Sweden and she would like to visit her son. And when she comes to his apartment, she experiences, which is probably the worst thing that a mother can experience, the fact that the son is there and he's dead. And everything says that this must be suicide. And she doubts that strongly. Now, when she has been an archaeologist, that is to pick out pieces and try to make these pieces work together as a whole, and that she can understand what his ways was looking like. Now suddenly that archaeologist is having to pick up the pieces of the life of her son to see what has happened to him. And that brings her inside the life of her son, things that she didn't know about him. It brings her to Africa and brings her, to a situation where she eventually realizes that her son had understood something what the huge pharmaceutical companies was doing in Africa, as using African people as rabbits, try out rabbits for new medicaments. This is the story.
See, something quite intriguing at the end of the book. What is written in this book is exclusively the result of my choices and decisions, of course, just as the anger is also mine, the anger that was my driving force. Because you do have a personal stake in AIDS in Africa, and you're not just a Swedish writer who thought it would be cool to have a thriller in Africa.
No, first of all, I since more than almost 30 years, I've spent and lived part of my life in Africa, on the African continent. So naturally, I have never visited Africa as a tourist, but I came to live there, which started when I was very young, and I was only 20. And I had a feeling that I wanted to have a perspective of the world from outside of the European egocentricity, in a way to understand what the world looked like, and that brought me to Africa. And I would say that what brings me back to Africa on the 10th of January 2008 is the same question, because I think that the African experience is so important for me to understand what the world looks like. Normally I say that I think that the African experience has made me a better European, because I had a distance to Europe. I could see fairly clearly what is really working in Europe, but I can also see the cracks in the wall in a way. So this is what brought me to Africa, and this is what brings me back to Africa. I think I become a better human being by getting this experience, and if I become a better human being, I probably also become a better writer. At least I hope.
So what do you
But
do?
the anger.
Anger.
Well, every time when I come back to Europe or the Western world, I would say, since I'm in Canada, after I have spent time in Africa, I become very angry when I look at the images presented in the newspapers and the television. It is like, if I really say it frankly, it is like we people in the Western world, we know everything about how Africa dies. We don't know anything about how they live. And I don't think that is fair enough, because even though we have a lot of problems on the African continent, people are living and loving and working and dreaming and fighting as much as you and I do. And I don't think it's fair to present such a deformated image of Africa. I try to struggle against that. I try to give other images.
It pretends to be a thriller, but it's actually a literary novel with a very strong point and a very strong message. And you do kind of go, now you're just going to have to deal with the fact that there are millions of people dying of AIDS in Africa, that the West is exploiting it, and you're not doing anything about it. Maybe you should.
Well, I think that it's up to you to decide whether you're irritated that you still continue to think about what you read, or that you eventually find it is very good that the book continues to live in you. And my answer must be that it might be that I'll come back to this story, but it might also be that you have to end the story yourself. It might be. We can sit here in 5 years' time to find out again.
The book is Kennedy's Brain, a novel. I've been speaking with the author Henning Mankell, and Kennedy's Brain, published by Knopf Canada.